St. John of the Cross addressed this back in the 1300s, and he called it the dark night of the soul. And it's when stressors come in your life, it's when the pressure comes against you that you hurt. It brings great pain or darkness to your soul, and there's a distance between you and God. And to put it simply, anything can be called a dark night if it goes on too long and it's too much for you. And it can happen to you at any age, and it can happen at different levels. And so I would just like to introduce you to Abby. She's 4 years old. She is distraught. And when we enter this video clip, she has just been asked, "Why are you so sad, Abby?"
Just because I'm tired of Barack Obama and Mitt Romney.
That's why you're crying? Oh, it'll be over soon, Abby. Okay? The election will be over soon, okay?
Okay.
Oh. Is there anybody who feels like that today? Amen. Isn't that cute? But we all feel that way, especially being in one of those battleground states. I mean, some of those commercial breaks are 5 solid minutes of everybody fighting each other. And I'm not sure if I like or hate Tammy Baldwin after all, because some of you know what I'm talking about. Those commercials are crazy. But that notwithstanding, vote early, vote often, whatever you got to do. But it'll be over soon. I'd like to go to a dark time in my life for a moment. Does anybody know what that is? That's my signature. And everybody's like, okay, I guess we'll believe you. There is a D in the front there, and that's about it. That's the way it's been all my life. It's never really changed. It never morphed. I had like New Year's resolutions from age like 19 till around 32. It was a number one thing. Fix your signature. Fix your signature. And I never got around to it. And I finally gave up on it. But there was a time that kind of marked that where I realized that my signature might be telling on me. And it was 8th grade. And there was this teacher, English teacher, didn't really get along all that well. His name was Mr. Dean. And he also was not only English teacher, but he also was the guy who took care of detention hall. So I just put it this way. We had a lot of contact with each other. Well, it became an issue so much that I was in there so long that I had to sign an agreement that I wouldn't do this and I wouldn't do this. I actually had to sign it. I remember bending over the desk. He's over on the other side. And I'm like, boom. And he takes it and he goes, you know, your signature tells a lot about yourself. Now, he wasn't telling me a good thing. I knew it. And I'm like, what does it say? Because you don't like yourself. And I'm like, whoa. And just a knee-jerk reaction. He says, I think you telling me that just tells me you don't like me. So we got to spend more quality time in detention hall in that season. But the killer part of it was, I was right. He didn't like me. But he was right, too. And I didn't like me. And at that time, being in 8th grade, the next couple of years really were a reflection of a lot of that inward, whatever it was, and it determined the decisions that I made and who I was. And the signature was just maybe an indicator of that, but maybe not. So I'd like to take us over to the scriptures in a similar way. There's a man, his name is Jacob, and he probably wasn't a fan of his name as well. And I would like to have Jen read out of Genesis chapter 25. And let's just kind of walk through the story of Jacob in the next 8 or so minutes. You're going to get a lot of stuff, in history right now in the scriptures. So if you could just kind of go with me. Jacob was the son of Isaac, who was the son of Abraham. So he's in that lineage of our faith. And so if you could just kind of walk us through this, starting in Genesis 25, verse 21.
Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife
Okay,
because she was childless.
Let me stop you there. Okay, Isaac prays to the Lord on behalf of his wife. That's intriguing because she has the ability to pray, but he's praying. Okay.
The Lord answered his prayer, and Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger."
All right, 1 second there. What God is saying to her, he's saying, you know what, the order that you're used to is not going to happen in this case. Usually the firstborn gets all the rights. He's going to be the guy. He's the man. He gets the birthright. He gets the inheritance. He gets the control in the family, and the younger doesn't. And God is seeing ahead. He's not necessarily forecasting what's going on in that he's making it happen. He's just saying, this is what's going to happen.
When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was hairy like a garment. So they named him Esau.
All right, so Esau, he's named Esau merely because he's red. He comes out red, and he's a bit hairy, and so he's named after his attribute as he comes out of the womb. Okay?
After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob.
Okay. Now that one's important because in the original language, what all that means is his name was Jacob. And because he was grabbing at the heel, that's a dirty trick that someone can do to somebody. That's the place of vulnerability that people have, is if you get grabbed by the heel, there's nothing you really do about it. You really can't swap behind or do anything, and it's this dirty pool. You can't mess that way. And so the word Jacob, we think is a beautiful name and everything because we don't know what it meant in the original language, but in the original language, it actually meant deceiver. Okay?
Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them.
Thank you, Jen. All right, so there's a couple lessons here. First of all, be careful what your husband prays for, ladies. That's the first one, because she could have prayed and really look what happened. So, but the second one is your name precedes you. And so just imagine for a moment your most predominant feature, your trait, your character trait, and if that was indeed what we called you. Cheap. Is Paul here? Weird. Is Mike here? Loud. Is Penny here? You think you're going to get out of the crosshairs here. I got enough here for all of you. Quiet. Is Alex here? Smart. Yes. Alec. Smart Alec. We're all here. Oh, and I found mine, but it can't fit in one. World class comedian. Look at that. Can you imagine you got to walk around and go, oh, that's world class comedian over there. I don't even want to know what Snooky and Honey Boo Boo means. But you have to imagine that somehow walking around with a moniker that goes after your most vulnerable trait from a baby up is going to have some effect in your life, isn't it? Can you imagine being called deceiver? Hey, look at this little deceiver. Come here, little deceiver. You imagine he gets to be 15 years old. Hey, deceiver, I want you to take care of my kids, deceiver. Wouldn't that be nice? It's not going to happen. So, what does it have to do with the dark night of the soul? The rest of the chapter tells you why. Jacob, even when he's younger, deceives his brother and gets him to trade his birthright for a bowl of red chili. Isn't that interesting that it's red that he falls for? Takes advantage of his weakness. He tricks his dad on his deathbed and takes his brother's inheritance. He's a deceiver. It's what he does. It's what he was almost born to do, but he wasn't. I would propose to you that his name had a lot to do with it. The brother finds out about this, and he's going to kill him. And so he goes after him. And Jacob is running for his life, leaving everything that he ever knew, all of his family, everything. He had no sustenance. And God meets him in his place of despair. Now, deceiver got himself into this boatload of trouble, but God shows up and sees him in a bad place. And he says, a better day is coming. There will be a day that you prosper. There will be a day that you will be something actually great. And so chapter 29 comes along, and he enters into a family. He's working on a farm, and he sees beautiful Rachel. Oh, Rachel. Oh, and he goes to the father Laban. He says, "Oh, Laban, I gotta, have her for my wife." He goes, "Oh, let me make you a deal. You work 7 years here on the farm, and she's all yours, brother." So he works 7 years, and he's like, "Yeah, this is my prosperity. This is the good times that God promised me." And the day comes, he says the vows, he lifts the veil, and it's the older sister Leah. The deceiver has been deceived. So he goes to Laban because the vow's already been made. It's already a done deal. Says, "What are you doing?" And, Laban says, "Well, I can't be marrying off the younger sister before the older, and it's just part of the deal. I thought you would have figured that out. But if you work 7 more years, you can have beautiful Rachel. Hopefully she's beautiful after all those years, but that's a whole other thing." He worked 7 years. 14 years have passed. He does get Rachel. But he got nothing. He's got no equity. He's always been working for Laban, and he has nothing for his own family. And so Jacob is frustrated, and you can tell if you read the story that his deceiver part starts growing within him again. And he's like, I'm not going to wait for God to bless me and to prosper me. I'm going for it myself. So he devises his plan to take the best of the flock from Laban. And you have to read the story to see how he does that, because it's pretty complex, because deceivers, as they age, get more deceptive and more clever. And it's very clever. And he's doing a really good job, but he actually does too good of a job. Laban catches on to it, says, I'm going to kill you. And so here's Jacob running away from, again, everything that he knew, people going after him to go kill him. And you would think that that's rough. Now, that's a dark life that he's living, but his dark night is just beginning. It's been, even if a dark night lasts just a little while is defined on which side of the bathroom door you're on. Right? Oh, it's just a little while. Oh, it's just a little while. Jacob's on the wrong side of the door, and it's going to take a lot longer than a little while for him to get through this. Jacob sends a messenger ahead to the land that he's running to. Anybody want to guess what land that he's going to be running into? His brother. He's going right towards his brother. It was the only way he could go, and that's the way. So he sends a messenger and says, hey, Esau, hey, Red, remember good times. It's all good, right? And Esau sends a message, yeah, it's all good, and I'm going to come and meet you with 400 of my strongest men. Get ready. So Jacob becomes a praying man. But as he prays, he splits his family in two. You guys go that way. You guys go that way. That way we have a good chance that I only lose half of my family, because they will kill every one of you. You see what's going on here? He's praying, but he's already getting ready to lose at least half of what he has. So he's praying really hard. Genesis 32:9. Then Jacob prayed, O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. Can you pick up any irony? Can you pick up maybe a little bit of sarcasm there? Maybe. Verse 10, I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. And some of you are saying, I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid that he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said in verse 12, I will surely make you prosper and make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. All this is just backstory. And so I'd just like to ask you right now, have you been there? Have you been in this dark night of the soul? Have you experienced God working in your life, and you've recognized His voice, you've seen His leading, you've felt His presence, and that somehow you didn't measure up? Somehow that bad trait popped up out of you, and it got the better of you. And you're traveling along, and you lost track of where God was and where He's in, and you're not even sure that you have your head screwed on right. Have you ever been there? Probably most Tuesdays. And maybe you're here and you're working for God, and you're serving Him the best you can, but you can't hear from Him, and you don't know where you lost Him. Maybe in this place, God's trying to show you something you'd rather not see. And He's saying, I want you to address that pride or that arrogance or that bitterness or that greed or whatever that is. And you're like, no, I don't want to look at that thing. And you find yourself more away from God. Or maybe you're afraid of something. Maybe you're afraid of your health issues. Maybe you're afraid of aging. Maybe you're afraid of a person. I don't know what that is. And you don't want to look at it. And God's like, I need you to look at it. I need you to address that thing. Maybe it's a character flaw that you have, one of these things and beyond and deeper, and you know it's there, but you don't want to deal with it. And you're thinking, if I ignore it long enough, God will move on. He's got bigger things in the world to deal with, and if I just remain right here, He'll just move on and He'll forget about it because, He's God and He's busy. Have you ever been there? Are you there now? Are you running and you don't even know? God loves you. He loves you, but He wants something different in your life. He doesn't want you to stay just stationary all the time. He wants you to make progress and to take territory in your life and other people's lives around you. He wants to do something different. He wants to do something more. He wants to break the bondages that are holding you back, whether it's guilt, whether it's failure, whether it's anger, whether it's fear. He wants you to move from here to here. Proverbs 17:3 says, fire tests the purity of silver and gold, but the Lord tests the heart. In this place that you may find yourself, just like Jacob, it felt like fire. It felt like a measure of hell was engulfing him, and it wasn't good at all. But look what Proverbs says. It says, fire tests the gold. How do you get pure gold? How do you purify gold? You heat it up, and you heat it up not just a little bit, you heat it up a lot, and you throw it in an oven, and you just burn off all the stuff that's in there. And the stuff that tends to make it really strong, like iron and zinc and copper and all these metals that are junk metals need to be burned off. And these would be the character flaws that are in you. But the only way the character flaws are ever going to come out is with heat and with pounding and with forging. Because God loves you that much that He doesn't want you to stay where you're at. And so He is willing to take you through that dark night and to bring you through that fiery furnace, as it were, so that you become more pure and soft and pliable, and humble and teachable and receptive to what God would be teaching you and doing in your life, so that you become the real you that God's designed you to be. The time when you feel most oppressed, the time when you feel most attacked, the time when you feel the most pressure in your life, the time when you feel furthest from God is the time when God is doing His best work in your soul, in your heart. And I tell you as a pastor, and I tell you as a human being, this is a fact. It is a truth. And some of us have not encountered God at that really deep level because we haven't been patient enough, we haven't pressed through enough to actually experience God in that richness, because we keep him at a distance and we say, no more fire, no more fire. A writer that I like, Alan Jones, says it this way. He calls it the second conversion. The first conversion, we come to Jesus and he says it's marked by closeness and joy. You know, I come to Christ and I surrender, and the war between he and I is over. You know, we have peace. Jesus starts living inside of me. He starts leading me, and I'm feeling that. I mean, everything kind of goes really awesome that first couple years, you know, that you're with Christ. You even get number 1 parking spaces, and it's praise the Lord, right? You know, you get good hair days, you know, more than you get bad hair days. But then he said the second one is marked by absence and dryness. And for those who come to know Christ, there's the honeymoon period. But there's this period that's marked by absence and dryness. Where are you, God? Aren't you working in my life? Why don't you leave me like the way you used to? But the real question is are you going to reject that? Are you going to run away from that pressure, from that place where God is, or are you going to bend with him? And are you going to be who God's called you to be? We'd like to just look at Jacob's prayer. In his desperation, a couple principles I'd like you to take away, and you have pens. I would invite you to write this down. But Jacob in his prayer, now remember, he was the deceiver. He caused a lot of his trouble. You've caused a lot of your troubles that you find yourself in right now. But your prayer can be similar to Jacob's. First of all, he confesses his fear. Number 1, confess your fear. What are you afraid of? What don't you like? You go ahead and just tell God. Say, I don't like the pressure I'm under right now. I don't like the attacks that I'm undergoing. I don't like the obstacles that I have. And put that before him. Second, notice in his whole prayer, he may have that little bit of sarcasm there. Or maybe he doesn't. You know, he says, like, I'm going to the land that you said I was going to prosper in, you know, so you need to save my... But he never blames. He doesn't blame God. And I would just ask you, even though you want to blame God, refrain. Say, God, this is my problem, and that's it. Number 3, he is alone, and it's really interesting. There's no indication in his prayer that he knows he's being heard by God. Even at the end of the prayer, he said, I'm alone. I'm alone. He didn't say, oh, I have your presence, Lord. He didn't say that. Yet he prays. He's praying. Even though he's not sure he's being heard, he prays. So number 3, pray. Even if you think your prayers are bouncing off, you know, the ceiling, pray. And lastly, he ends his prayer by reminding God what God had promised him back when he heard him clearly, back in the dream, back in the prophecy that things are going to be good. And he doesn't blame him and say, this stuff hasn't happened yet, but he just says, you said. I remember those days where you said I was going to get this. I remember when you would lead me on a regular basis to be something where I remembered that. And he says, I recall that. And so the fourth thing is, go back to the place where you heard God last. And some of you, that just might be a couple weeks, a couple months, but a couple years, might be a couple years. Maybe even a decade. Go back to that place. Say, God, I remember when. It's interesting because funny thing about God is he doesn't change. I am the Lord your God who changes not. I will be with you always, even until the very end. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. There's a stability in God, and God never moves. If you can bear it, we will continue in verse 23 of chapter 32, because his dark night continues. After he sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions, so Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. And when the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. And then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not go unless you bless me." The man was God. And so I would just like to ask you right now, have you been at a point in your life where you are desperately praying to pray more? God, make me a better prayer person. Lord, let me hear you. Let me connect with you. Lord, help me become more humble and more pliable. Lord, let me see more of you. Have you been in that desperate place? Lord, this character flaw that dogs me, would you please take it away from me? It's killing me. Have you ever been there and you don't know if God's hearing you? You don't know if he's anywhere around, and it feels like you're in a wrestling match with God. Have you ever been there? And the strange thing, and again, I'm telling you this from experience, from what the scriptures say, when you're in this dark night and you're trying desperately to get close to God, it feels like God's against you when you're trying to walk with him. And it's so discouraging, and I can't tell you why he does it, but we can talk about the many times that even in the scriptures it says that God would turn his face away from us and he would give us a distance on purpose so that we would seek him. Continue in verse 27. The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Deceiver," he answered, "Jacob." Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel." One who struggles with God is what Israel means. Because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Because he already knew who he was. Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, meaning the face of God, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. In the middle of your struggle, that dark night that doesn't seem to be ending, you are praying more. You are looking for God more. You are becoming more pure through the pressure, and the change that you really desired in your heart is actually happening. It's just not happening the way that you wanted it to. Does that make sense? You're in the middle of it, and then you're getting toward the end. You're like, "Man, I'm praying a lot. I have no choice, but I just got to pray. And you know what? And I'm starting to see breakthrough. And you know what? Those character flaws, I don't even have time to pay attention to because I'm in the middle of the fire because the junk is getting out of your life. And you are making it through. And some of you are in the middle of that dark night. You don't think you're making any progress, but you are making progress. You just can't see it, and you don't like the way the change is coming. And the river is church light. It might even cause you to have a heavenly limp in your life. And those who have that heavenly limp recognize it in another person when they see it. Because it's a gift from God. It's a gift for you to get you beyond the bad you to the good you that God always wanted you to be. He gets a new name. Oh, we're all covered up. I can't change it. Well, it's all covered. But imagine being Jacob. And every day he's been called deceiver, 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 and now his name is one who struggles with God. He may get up in the morning wanting to deceive, but his name reminds him constantly to struggle with God and do right. Does that make sense? Imagine the power of getting a new name. That's us. You may have been whatever. But the Spirit is saying to you today, you're this. Take that new name. Would you just take the new name? And you might have a heavenly limp at the end, but you'll end up better. You know, I can just tell you right now, I'm going through one of those mini dark nights. I don't think it's the devastating, terrible thing, but it's a dark night. the struggles that we're going through as a church as we become influential in this county are heavy. Our leaders are taking hits left and right. Some of it's spiritual attacks. Some of it's just people being uncomfortable. Some of it's we're just frustrated with each other. We just don't know how to do what we know that we're supposed to be doing. And sometimes it seems like God has left us out there once in a while. You're like, really? We need help now. And so you look for the small things. And I was in the bookstore across the street, kind of having a tough time, and I find this sign. Can anybody read that? Fight one more round. That's all it said. And I picked this thing up on Wednesday, and it just hit my soul. And I'm like, that's right. You fight one more round with God. And you go with Him. And whatever it's going to do, it might leave a heavenly limp in the river, but will be better for it. Does that make sense? You go for it. It's okay to battle with God and to struggle with Him, because a sincere struggle with God will draw you closer to God. If you're in the boxing ring, are you close to the person you're struggling with? Yeah. Get in the ring with God. Duke it out with Him with respect, and see if He doesn't refine you, if He doesn't give you a new identity. Maybe you're always negative. Negative is your native tongue, baby. If there was a name to put on you, it would be Mr. Mrs. Negativity. And God's like, I want you to be an encourager. That's what your mark is. And you get up tomorrow morning and you're going to want to be negative. Rah, 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 rah. This is all wrong. Da, da, da. And then you remember, I'm to be an encourager. I'm not a rocket science because I can see all the problems in the world. I don't know what it is for you, but maybe you just write that down in the next few minutes. So let's just close our eyes.